Nachos amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a podcast about music where a group of friends share with each other an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. I'm Petey Rave, and I'm ready to study and or relax. Here with me is my team, my squad, my crew. We've got David.
Hi.
Yes. We've got Drew.
Squad.
Yeah. And of course, we still have the one, the only, our good friend and guest, Mike Avarant. How you doing, Mike?
Doing good. If you want to study, we have some lo-fi hip-hop beats you can study to.
Mm-hmm.
Also
like a GIF. Yeah. Let's cue that GIF. I feel like I just have that GIF going over here somewhere. But that'd be fun. Let's talk about.
I could just
album.
keep doing this for the rest of the show.
As long as you do the same repetitive motion over and over again.
Yes.
I've got a notebook and a pen. I can just start writing randomly.
Yeah. Just write random kanja. Let's talk about an album. The provider of the album, finally, it's his turn. It's the last episode, at least for now, with us. So it is Mike's turn to provide an album. Mike, what do you have to present to us this week?
I am bringing FlyLo's 2008 Los Angeles album.
Yeah.
It's an electronic, kind of defies genre a little bit. But we'll just call it electronica for now.
Mm-hmm. It's another opportunity for me to look up a Wikipedia article and see something being described as IDM, which is fantastic because I remember the IDM genre from like the early 2000s.
I saw that, but I wasn't sure what that stood for.
Oh, intelligent dance music.
Oh yeah,
it's like a big thing in the early 2000s.
I remember that now.
It's like I remember that, like, roaming different websites that had like different artists that played that. I think Frisky Radio played a good amount of IDM on some of their playlists, which was really cool.
Dance music to study to.
Yes. Or like dance prog. Like it was like dance music that was done with we're also going to be artsy about this, like
we're going to think about composition instead of, hey, you can shake your ass to this.
Yes. All right, let's talk about expectations with this album. David, what were your expectations coming into this album?
When I heard the name Flying Lotus, it sparked something in my memory, way in the back of my mind, and then I had to look up the name, and then I realized, I feel like I've heard him before. And then it was like, yeah, his music was on Adult Swim. That's right. So I was familiar with the work. And reading his Wikipedia article, he comes from a musical family. He's got a pedigree, so he's already got kind of a name for himself. So I was interested in hearing some more of this from him. I was interested.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what were your expectations coming into this album?
Well, I didn't look up anything before I started listening to this record. And I didn't really remember what Avarant said he was bringing before. All I knew was the name Flying Lotus. All I knew was the album Los Angeles, and what I know of Mike's musical taste, which I know he likes a lot of punk rock music and a lot of guitar-driven music and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, it's probably something along those lines. I had to do some readjusting.
Yeah.
You got swerved.
I got half a track in, and I was like, huh.
Guitars to start.
Okay. We're going somewhere else with this.
Yes. I wasn't quite sure what to expect when it came to this album. So I was intrigued nonetheless. It was an odd name, but I wasn't sure exactly what was going to come. But Mike, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the themes, elements that you would bring up?
There's so he's gone through like a lot of different phases, but back at this time he was doing a lot of kind of like glitch work and a lot of kind of experimental hip hop electronica. So it's really kind of almost in the vein of Madlib and J Dilla, where he's kind of experimenting through a lot of different styles and a lot of different flavors, I guess, through the whole thing. But there's a kind of a I don't want to say lo-fi because it gives you a certain idea, like lo-fi in terms of like a rock music sense, where it's not necessarily the cleanest sound the entire way through.
Yeah. David, how would you describe this album musically?
I would describe this album musically as some kind of electronica where I heard flashes of what came through the UK scene, flashes of some of the old UK drum and bass, and a little bit of trip hop, but made into something very modern and very American at the same time. Just taking splashes from the UK scene. And I found it to be really, really enjoyable. But at the same time, it needs to be an album that you're in the right mood for, or you're in the right headspace for. If you're looking for something with a little more adrenaline and a little more pump to it, probably not the recommendation. But if you're in a mood where you do have something you want to have in the background while you're studying, this is a great, great option.
Yeah, I think I like the sentence that I think sums it up is the first sentence in the Wikipedia article for intelligent dance music, which is or IDM. Intelligent dance music, commonly abbreviated as IDM, is a form of electronic music originating in the early 90s, which was regarded as, quote, cerebral, end quote, and better suited to, quote, home listening, end quote, than dancing. So it's like, yeah, kind of. I think that's the fitting description. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
So like I said, I kind of had to readjust. So that it was jarring at first a little bit, which is weird for this style. It does have a lot of the inserted like sort of hisses and pops that you get with modern lo-fi, right? The lo-fi hip hop that was a couple of years after this and feels like it took some from this a little bit at least, because you get some of the same tonal elements, if not the same compositional elements. So there's a lot of cool work with how there's a build in instrumentals. It's a thing where you get a big build up and then drop off, but the instruments you built at the beginning are usually the ones that fade away, which I think is really cool. It provides a neat ebb and flow to the composition on a lot of the tracks. You get this feel to it where there is a very well thought out layering to it. With instrumental music, I think that is super important to keep it interesting. If all of your instruments and all of your sort of ideas are very front loaded in the track, it very quickly becomes boring because it starts to loop around. There is some great examples of both of those I think we'll get into, and it's like you can sort of pick out where that's coming from. There is, like was said, a lot of different genres and feels that you're pulling from. There's a lot of hip hop element to it. There is a lot of jazz element to it. But at the same time, you get again, I keep harkening back to this, but the tone of it all feels connected if the composition and the instrument choice don't always, which I think is a cool way to do it. You have that experimentation, but you're never losing that sort of chilled out tone and feel to it. You're just taking from different ideas and different instrumentations and stuff like that and adding in, which I think is really neat.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like cool and very interesting, like as a composition. It's very much, it harkens back to some listening to some of that, like D James said, some of that scene, like of the techno scene of like the IDM scene, or like the mixes that I used to listen to on Frisky Radio, as I've cited, which I gotta check if they're still around. But in the meantime, it is a very cool like mix, and it's very much an album that feels like a mix. Like it's a little bit more like a hard defined, as far as like different songs being, different tracks actually being different songs, but it still feels like a slightly more compartmentalized, long form like techno mix that I used to listen to back in the day. When I would download them from different sources, from like just literally looking on like Kazaa or like LimeWire, all those for like mixes, like just like drum and bass mix or techno mix, and just grabbing whatever 2-hour mix with like somebody doing something on live on the Breeze block, some live on the Breeze blocks or something like that, or like somebody doing like a live mix, like how I originally found that Prodigy, the Dirt Chamber sessions, from like trying to find all these different types of mixes. So it harkens back to those things, those long form, fun, full, like just like, this is just an album length, so it's not super long. It's like 43 minutes long, but like the when they had like this 2-hour mix, or just like you just put it on and it was just like go through these different things, music, and goes through these different things and layer things into a mix, and you can tell that it was just a dude on a DJ booth layering different songs in and layering different mixes in. But it harkens back to that without being exactly that, but it does harken back to that in really, really cool ways, and it's definitely a cool experience. Let's talk about we'll see if we can talk about tracks. Let's talk about tracks. Mike, what would be some of the key tracks or moments for you?
So I had two that I really love. It's Camel and Parisian Goldfish. But then the other one that I feel like does a really good job of establishing the beginning of the album is Beginner's Falafel, which I think is the second or third track, because they do all kind of blur together, but there are kind of runs and there are breaks where it has a completely different vibe in it. And also Parisian Goldfish, because it uses like the main percussive element through the entire thing is a cowbell, which makes it extremely weird. It kind of throws back to some sort of like late 90s dance scene thing. But for those, it's those three. I'm kind of interested to see what other tracks everybody else picked though.
Yeah. David, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Melt, because it was so very not like anything else on the album at all, but it was still really, really enjoyable. It had a tribal feel to it, and the entire song was all percussion, and it was just really, really enjoyable. GNG BNG, it goes into a really cool place that I wrote down as this is inside my head and I kind of don't want it to leave. It was just this really cool loop inside of my head that I really enjoyed and just kept rewinding and listening to over and over. That was the song that I probably put on repeat the most. And lastly, for the Vaporwave kids out there, Parisian Goldfish. I enjoyed this one, and I think if you're into Vaporwave, you'll enjoy that one too.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Well, one of the ones I kept coming back to in my mind was super early on with Breathe, period, something / Stellar Star, with all the weirdness of that title. The warping in the melody line that like the warping in the melody line is that tone, that effect that you hear in like vaporwave or lo-fi that sort of elicits that I'm pronouncing this right, the hypnagogic sort of response, right? That weird dreamy sort of state, and I think that's really cool. It also got that super jazzy feel to it. Comet Course, the beat on that one is probably my favorite, and it's got like spacey 80s laser arcade game like sounds in the entire melody, which I think is actually super super cool. And the other one would be what was it? Auntie's Lock Infinitum. At the end, the vocals by Laura Darlington are just ever so slight, ever so gentle in the mix, and it's just for what this entire album sort of like, as far as like a feeling to me was, and like how the tone sort of had that very like chilled out state, to just have that like just sprinkled at the end there, I think was really really cool. There was some vocals, a couple songs before that, but I think the Laura's really sort of, to me, was more synonymous with what the record was in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of blending in together. I did enjoy some of the track names. In fact, there's a track called Roberta Flack. There's a track called Gangbang, which is fun.
BNG is what I called it. Everybody.
BNG. Gangbang. Let's bring it back around the horn. Talk about some conclusive thoughts. David, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I really, really enjoyed it. I appreciated the experimental hip-hop style of it, and I appreciated the fact that the trip-hop foundation of it, I could hear all throughout. I heard a ton of the UK scene, and in a very, very good way, because I love the UK electronic scene of the 90s. I absolutely love it. Flying Lotus has a lot of creative ideas that he really makes all his own, and they come through here. I would say that this is definitely a chill album, to the point where it was almost a little tough to listen to from start to finish, because I just kept drifting off into the album. It's why I ended up giving it a few more listens, because it was definitely a album to chill out to, almost to its detriment. But if you're in that headspace, it's fantastic, and I definitely recommend it.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what is your conclusion at the end of the day?
This album was surprising on a lot of levels. And I really enjoyed every bit of it. It's something that, if it is removed from what I don't want to say the joke, but the meme almost has become with lo-fi chilled out hip hop beats to relax and or study and or chill out to. It is removed from that. It has some of the tonal qualities of that. But it is removed from that. If you think you like that stuff, sometimes things like this, I believe I brought a DJ before who I found through stuff like that, and it was something different, and hearing the whole album sort of in context was a lot better. This is one of those things where if you like that tone, but you maybe want to hear a more thought out version of that, I would dig into this. Again, it might not give you the full weird nostalgia, hypnagogic sort of thing that lo-fi always does, but I think it's better for it because it makes more sense as a package and less as a hit of background noise when you need it. So,
yeah. Yeah, this album is a full album, not a collection of songs. It is hard to kind of pick out any particular song, but because they all kind of work well together and their hosts, it's all cohesive. Like it blends together in the best way, because I think it's a full experience, a full length experience, like a full length intelligent dance music experience. And I think it works well for that. It's cool, it's chill, it like lets you get into like a really cool mood and headspace. And then it's compositionally really interesting. And I think that all that together just makes it for I think a worth listen. And it's nice. Takes me back to when I used to sit and listen, like I said, sit and listen to 2-hour like drum and bass mixes and like 2-hour like electronica mixes on like Frisky Radio or on iTunes or like different podcasts that would do the same, send you mixes and stuff. So it's like it was just a cool like nostalgic element for me, just on that tip. But yeah, Mike, what would be your conclusion on this album?
So my conclusion is kind of going back to what Drew said, where this kind of defied his expectations of what I would normally listen to. It's mostly because I really don't like electronic music that much. I'm very particular about certain genres, and electronic is really one of those where I don't really listen to a lot of it unless it really catches me. And this is one of those albums that catches me start to finish the entire way through. There's always something changing in it. It doesn't do the old electronic thing of just kind of looping and repeating the same idea for too long until it gets grating and annoying. It kind of hits the notes that it wants to hit and move on to the next ones. One thing I do feel like I'd be remiss if I don't bring up is that this is about a decade ago from him, and it's worth checking out the rest of his stuff because from this point, he starts to go more jazzy and more natural sounding, as opposed to like pure electronica. But it's kind of, this album is very coherent in his message. It's very coherent in what he's trying to get across, and it gives you kind of a good idea of where he started from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it gives him a idea where he established himself. So I'm looking forward to checking out more of his stuff. Might slip it into some of my mixes. Yeah, those are our thoughts on Flying Lotus's Los Angeles, or FlyLo for short. Now we get to the main event of the evening. We get to our haiku reviews, the moment we've all been waiting for, where we sum it all up in poetic form. It's a fun time had by all. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. David, what is your haiku?
Drift off with some beats. The trip hop core is solid. Best in the evening.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what is your haiku?
Lo-fi sounds, chill mood, an easy, soothing listen. Dig the feel of it.
Mm-hmm. My haiku: chill instrumentals to study and or relax. Blends together well. And finally, Mike, what is your haiku?
In the fewest words, hip-hop electronica, experimental.
Mm-hmm. Sums it all up well. Those are our thoughts on FlyLo, aka Flying Lotus, and his album Los Angeles. You can, of course, find it on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence. On that Spotify playlist will be next week's record. We will be back with another round of episodes, another guest. We haven't figured that out yet. I just realized we haven't booked anyone. But I know the album because it's going to be my album because I always go first. I have an ego. But speaking of egos,
PD Rave is the number one in the rotation.
Mm-hmm. I'm the leadoff guy. I may not hit the home runs, but I get contact and I reach base. And that's my job.
Hey.
But my album, speaking of ego, it's gonna be nerdcore rapper extraordinaire Lex the Lexicon Artist and her album Raging Ego.
I think you want to hear the album Rage Against the Machine.
No. Okay. Amazon voice assistants aside, no, not
Leave it
Rage
in.
Against the Machine.
Leave it in.
Raging Ego, by Lex the Lexicon Artist. Look forward to that, but that'll be next week, and this is this week. Before we get into the plugs, Mike, do you have anything you want to let people know about where people can find you? What, plug anything on the internet?
If I'm gonna plug anything, I've been doing photography stuff that's on Instagram. You just have to put the word real in front of Avarant here.
Yeah. Real, REAL.
REAL, yeah.
Because
somebody
Not
else.
the fake
AVARANT.
Avarant.
Yeah, somebody else got it ahead of me.
Yeah, so go check out Real Avarant for some photography. We'll look forward to that. But you can, of course, find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJM. Drew is at XDrewciferX. Mike is at Avarant, AVARANT, and Real Avarant on Instagram. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com. Rebelli.net for listen to other shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube and other places. You can find us Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud. Find us everywhere you find podcasts. Subscribe, like, share, do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Oodle toot.
Peace.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.